So we're going to switch to the Outer Hebrides now. This is a Gaelic population. The only two European populations that were still around that he could study were the Swiss and the Outer Hebrides, very isolated populations. These people lived on this windswept island. The island, they had no animals on the island, so they had no meat, no milk, no chickens, no eggs. They didn't have trees on the island, so no fruit, no nuts. They couldn't grow vegetables on this island. They didn't have any broccoli or kale. How could they possibly be healthy? So what were these people eating? Because he found virtually no tooth decay, no tuberculosis, and he described a very coherent, friendly society. No one had to lock their doors. There was no thievery or any kind of violence on this island. So what were these people eating? Well, the number one source of calories was seafood, of course. Seafood of all types, including shellfish, and not just the skinless fillets of the fish. They ate the heads, they ate the livers, they steamed the livers to get the oil out of the livers. That was considered very important. And they also were able to grow oats on this island, and so they had porridge and oat cakes prepared very carefully. The sacred food, the food that children got every morning for breakfast so they could grow up healthy and strong, was cod's head stuffed with oats and chopped cod's liver. So eat your breakfast there. I think there's more palatable ways to do this. In Alaska, Dr. Price was able to go into the hinterland and study the people who were still eating their native foods. Here he found virtually no cavities and beautiful wide faces and naturally straight teeth. The woman on the left, he described her teeth as literally 2 rows of pearls. Very sturdy and strong, no tuberculosis. He talked to a doctor who had been there for 30 years among the Eskimos, and he said he had never seen a case of heart disease, cancer, or any condition requiring an operation among those natives who were eating their traditional foods. Also, the women gave birth very easily without any pain. Typically, a woman gave birth at night while her husband was asleep, and when he woke up in the morning, she introduced him to the new baby. The children were sturdy and strong. Look at these children, very curious, right? But the interesting thing is that he never, in these cultures, heard a baby cry. And they weren't crying because they were well-nourished. A well-nourished baby doesn't cry. And a baby that's crying all the time is telling you something, that he's hungry. His belly may be full of food, but he's not getting what he needs. Many of the Eskimos had missing teeth and worn down teeth because they chewed on leather to make their clothes, but even these worn down teeth were not decayed. Worn down right to the dentin, but no decay. And this was a stark contrast to what he found in the towns, the trading posts where the white man's food was coming in, the displacing food of modern commerce. The foods got there a long time before the dentists got there. And even today, a lot of these little towns have no dentists. And the tooth decay was a very serious problem because of the pain. And they became prone to suicide. And the only reason given for suicide was the pain of tooth decay. They became prone to tuberculosis, and then in just one generation, the faces became more narrow. There were dental deformities, overbites, underbites. And that's a nutritional problem. You are not providing the body with the nutrients it needs to build according to the blueprint. And the blueprint of every person on this planet, we're all children of God, we all have the same blueprint, and that is to have a wide, attractive face and naturally straight teeth. That is the blueprint. A major component of the Alaskan diet was seal oil, which they're carrying in this leather bag here. The seal oil was used as a major source of calories, used for cooking, used for dipping. They had this Eskimo ice cream, which was made by whipping the seal oil until it became frothy, and then they would add a few berries, and that was the Eskimo ice cream. Today they make the Eskimo ice cream out of whipping Crisco. Yeah. Naturally, they ate a lot of fish, and the fish were either cooked, sometimes they were eaten frozen. If they were out hunting, they would eat frozen fish. And the fish were also fermented. They were thrown into a hole and allowed to get kind of rotten, and the consistency of ice cream, and that was considered a real delicacy, the fermented fish. The Eskimos were very observant, and they noticed that their dogs, if the dogs got fresh fish, they could not pull their sleds all day long. But if they got fermented fish, they had more stamina and they could pull the sleds all day long. So we will be talking about fermented foods and how they provide a lot more stamina and strength for us, and why. These are salmon eggs drying in the sun, fish eggs. And when Dr. Price asked them why they went to such trouble to preserve these salmon eggs, they said, we need these fish eggs so we can have healthy babies. And the fish egg is an extremely nourishing food, and this is something that we definitely encourage. I know when my daughter was pregnant, my gift was I sent her caviar every now and then. So very important food, nutrient-dense food, especially for pregnancy and for healthy babies. These beautiful Indians lived in the Seminole Indians lived in the Florida Everglades. He had to sit there for 2 weeks before they gave him permission to photograph them. But you can see what beautiful looking people these are. They have broad faces, naturally straight teeth. What we're seeing here is the full expression of the genetic potential, because the building materials are abundant in their diet. Now let's compare our beautiful Indian princess in the upper right with someone from her same tribe. It's the same genetics, same environment, but a different diet. Her parents were eating the white man's processed food, and you can see that the face is much more narrow and the teeth are crooked and crowded. And the teeth are a mirror to the rest of the body. This is the only part of the body where we can see inside, right? But if the teeth are not formed properly, if there not enough space for them, it's a sign that there will be problems in the rest of the body. Nothing has been formed to the maximum. So we like to say the teeth tell the tale. When the teeth are naturally straight, it means there's going to be plenty of room in the head for the pituitary, the pineal, the hypothalamus. The sinus cavities and the ear tubes will be capacious, so they will be very immune to infection. And I do like to point out that the hypothalamus is the master gland. It directs all the other glands. It's right in the middle of your head in a cavity in the skull. And so if the skull is narrow, there's not going to be as much room for the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is the seat of impulse control. And when we think of traditional cultures, the Native Americans, for example, we think they were people with great impulse control. They could withstand suffering and privation. They didn't react quickly to things. They had impulse control. When we think of our children today, what are we seeing in our young people today? We're seeing lack of impulse control. This all goes back to the diet, the preconceptual and the pregnancy diet. So if the teeth are straight, we see good skeletal development, good musculature. When the fetus is starting to grow, there's a cell that divides and divides till you get 32, and then that divides and half go to the teeth and half go to make the spinal column. So the spinal column and the teeth are very much related. And if there's plenty of room for the teeth and the teeth are well formed, then the spinal column will also be well formed and strong. Keen eyesight and hearing. Now let me just ask, how many in this audience need corrective lenses, glasses or contact lenses? Okay, it's about 70% of us. Now if we were a tribe and had to survive by hunting, and only 38% of us had perfect eyesight, I don't think we would make it. So keen eyesight and hearing, optimal function of all the organs, and then we have the mental nourishment, because our mental outlook, the way we think, our optimism, all that depends on good nutrition. And Dr. Price was always intrigued by how optimistic and happy these people were. They laughed a lot. You know, everyone seemed to get along. And finally, when the face is broad and round, the pelvic opening is round. And that is the perfect shape for the baby to come through. And this was an observation that all of these early explorers and anthropologists made, was how easy childbirth was. Okay, if the teeth are coming crowded and crooked, it means there's going to be compromised space for the master glands in the head. There'll be poor development, poor posture, easily injured. Now they're actually restricting time on the playgrounds because the kids get injured. They're just bouncing around out there. That's not normal. Poor eyesight and hearing. Eyesight is one of the first things to go. Compromised function of all the organs, so the pancreas, the heart, the kidneys. There's far less cells in the kidney, far fewer cells in the kidney when the child is poorly nourished. And then you see the mental aspects, the depression, behavior problems, learning problems, and finally, the pelvic opening will not be round, it will be oval. And that is not a good shape for the baby's head to come through, and childbirth becomes very painful and life-threatening. Dr. Price went to the South Seas. He made a point of going to islands that were not, where they did not have trading posts, so he could study people who were still eating their traditional foods. And this is my favorite page in the whole book. Look at the width of the palate in these faces. And this is the blueprint for all of us, okay? And I like to point out that these happy boys are teenagers. Our teenagers don't look like this. They're not happy, you know? They're grumpy, they're depressed, they're addicted, they're worried. These are happy teenage boys. A couple more examples, and the beautiful woman in the upper photograph is 90 years old. We don't know the average lifespan of these people, and certainly many people were carried off by injury and trauma. But Dr. Price found many elderly people in all of these cultures. Many Eskimos bragged of being over 100 years old. We don't know if they were telling the truth. But this certainly wasn't the kind of diet that gave beautiful people that died young, which is what the critics say about our diet. So you can see how gracefully you age when you have that good facial structure to begin with. So, foods of the South Sea Islanders. Now we're in a tropical climate. We have a different type of diet. Naturally, lots of seafood. They have crab, octopus, lots of fish. They have pigs. Pigs were a sacred food brought by Captain Cook. Once the pig arrived, they were immediately recognized as a sacred food. They cooked the pigs in underground ovens, being careful to reserve all the blood and the fat. That was put into vessels made of banana leaves and cooked in these same ovens. They had a starchy food. This was actually a fairly high carbohydrate diet. They had yams or taro. This is on the lower right is the taro root. They've got the pig wrapped in the taro leaves, but the taro root is also fermented, put in a hole and allowed to ferment. And the boy on the left is having a snack, which he did not get from a vending machine. He's eating a delicious fatty sea worm. This is a fabulous photograph that was sent to me by Kay Baxter in New Zealand. This is Tahiti. Can you guess what these are? Well, I told you what they are, right? They are shark stomachs, and they put the liver inside the shark stomach and let the livers ferment, and then they capture the oil that drips out. This is fermented shark liver oil, and this was a sacred food considered very important for having healthy babies. The contrast between these healthy, happy native people eating their traditional foods and those on the modernized diet was just tragic.